My daughter left me at a bus stop with no money. She had no idea I'd just won $5.2 million. The cold metal bench pressed against my spine as I clutched my worn purse, feeling more abandoned than I ever thought possible. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd share. And if you, for even a second, feel like this sounds familiar, please just hit that like button and subscribe. It'll help me keep sharing these stories that need to be told. My name is Dorothy Catherine Williams, and at 68 years old, I was wearing the same beige winter coat I'd owned for over a decade. The fabric had faded from cream to a dingy off-white, and the left pocket sagged from years of carrying peppermint candies for my grandchildren. The lining had torn months ago, creating a small hole near the hem that I kept meaning to fix, but never found the time between babysitting duties and endless errands for my daughter Amanda. That Tuesday morning in downtown Chicago, the November wind cut through the worn wool like it was tissue paper. I sat on the cold metal bench at the Fullerton Avenue bus stop, my arthritic knees throbbing from the damp weather, watching strangers hurry past with their lives intact and their dignity uncompromised. My leather purse, a Christmas gift from Amanda 3 years ago, back when she still pretended to care, rested heavily on my lap, containing the last of my prescription painkillers, a crumpled tissue stained with lipstick, and a small white envelope I hadn't dared to open yet. The envelope had arrived from the Illinois State Lottery Commission 3 days earlier, after a quick-pick ticket I'd bought on impulse at the corner market matched every single number in the Mega Millions drawing. Inside that sealed paper lay proof that I had become the sole winner of $5.2 million. But I hadn't touched the money yet. I hadn't even told anyone about it, because part of me, the foolish, hopeful part that still remembered when Amanda used to call me Mama instead of just Mom with that tired, exasperated tone, wanted to believe she might still see me as more than just a convenient babysitter and errand runner. That morning had started like so many others. Amanda had called at 7:30, her voice already sharp with irritation. "Mom, I need you to come to Lily's doctor appointment with me. She's been acting up, and I need an extra pair of hands. Plus, you can watch her afterward while I run some errands." I'd been awake since 5, as I always was these days, sitting in my small Wicker Park apartment with a cup of instant coffee, watching the sunrise paint the brick buildings across the street in shades of gold and pink. The radiator clanged its familiar morning song, and somewhere in the building, Mrs. Chen's television murmured the early news. These quiet moments had become my sanctuary, the only time when no one needed anything from me. "Of course, sweetheart," I'd replied, as I always did. "What time should I be ready? I'll pick you up at 9. And Mom?" Her voice carried that warning tone I'd grown to recognize. "Don't suggest any of your home remedies to Dr. Peterson, okay? He's a real doctor." The comment stung as it was meant to. I'd raised 3 children, including Amanda, using nothing but love, common sense, and yes, occasionally some chamomile tea and warm honey. But apparently, my 42 years of mothering experience counted for nothing compared to her nursing degree from a community college. When 9:30 came and went without any sign of Amanda's silver Honda Pilot, I called her cell phone. It rang once before going to voicemail. I tried again 15 minutes later with the same result. By 10 o'clock, my anxiety had transformed into the familiar knot of dread that lived permanently in my stomach these days. At 10:15, my phone finally chimed with a text message. "Can't make it. Something came up with Derek. Just take the bus to the clinic. We'll meet you there. And Mom, don't spend too much on the bus fare, okay? Money's tight right now." I stared at the screen until the words blurred together, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. She knew, she had to know, that I had no cash, not a single dollar bill in my wallet. I'd used my last few coins yesterday to buy a small coffee at the clinic's cafe while waiting for my own doctor to finish running an hour behind schedule. The bus fare was $2.25 each way. The distance from my apartment to the pediatric clinic on North Michigan Avenue was nearly 4 miles through downtown traffic. In November, with my knees that screamed in protest every time the weather changed. But more than the physical discomfort, more than the embarrassment of being a 68-year-old woman stranded without bus fare, was the crushing realization that my daughter, my firstborn, The baby I'd held through countless sleepless nights. The little girl who used to braid my hair and promise she'd take care of me when I got old had left me stranded without a second thought. I called her back immediately. This time, she answered on the fourth ring. "What, Mom? I'm busy." "Amanda, honey, I don't have any money for the bus. Could you maybe—" "Oh, come on. Don't be so dramatic. You've got to have something in that purse of yours. Check the couch cushions or something." I checked everything. I used my last quarters yesterday at the— "Mom, I really can't deal with this right now. Derek's having a crisis at work, and Lily's being impossible. Just figure it out, okay? You're an adult." The line went dead. I sat there in my kitchen staring at the phone, feeling something crack open inside my chest. Not my heart. That would have been too clean, too sudden. This was more like the sound of old wood splintering under too much weight. A slow, agonizing break that had been building for years. 20 minutes later, I found myself at the bus stop anyway, having walked the 6 blocks from my apartment with the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, Amanda would realize what she'd done and come back for me. Maybe she'd remember that I was her mother, not just some inconvenient obligation she could dismiss with a text message. The bench was cold and unforgiving, painted green metal that had been scratched and worn by thousands of other people who'd waited for rides that might or might not come. A young mother with a stroller sat at the other end, scrolling through her phone while her toddler babbled happily about the pigeons pecking at crumbs near the trash can. An elderly man in a Cubs jacket checked his watch repeatedly, muttering under his breath about the CTA's reliability. Normal people. People with places to go and people who cared whether they arrived safely. I pulled my coat tighter around my shoulders and tried to ignore the way my empty stomach was starting to cramp. I hadn't eaten breakfast, saving my last slice of bread for tomorrow's toast. The envelope in my purse seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, heavy with possibility and bitter irony. 43 minutes passed before I finally accepted that Amanda wasn't coming back. That's when the real crying started. As I sat on that cold bench, watching the bus pull away without me aboard, my mind drifted back to all the times I should have said no, all the moments when I chose Amanda's comfort over my own dignity, believing that sacrifice was the same thing as love. It started when she was 22, fresh out of nursing school, drowning in student loan debt, and too proud to ask for help directly. Instead, she'd call with emergencies that always required immediate financial assistance. The car payment she'd forgotten about, the credit card bill that had somehow doubled overnight, the security deposit for an apartment she absolutely had to have because her roommate was toxic. "Mom, I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate," she'd say. And I'd hear the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I get my first paycheck." That first loan was $800. Then it was $1,200. Then $2,000. Each time, Amanda would hug me tight and promise this was the last time, that she'd learned her lesson about money management. Each time, I believed her because I needed to believe her. The payback never came. Instead, the requests evolved. When Amanda got pregnant with Lily 5 years ago, suddenly I wasn't just the emergency ATM anymore. I was the built-in childcare service. At first, it felt like a blessing. After my husband Robert died 7 years ago, my apartment had become a tomb of silence. The thought of having a grandchild to spoil, to love, to fill the empty spaces in my days made every financial sacrifice worth it. "Mom, you're going to be the best grandma ever," Amanda had said, rubbing her barely there belly while I wrote another check to cover her prenatal vitamins. "Lily is so lucky to have you." But somewhere between Lily's first birthday and her 5th, I stopped being grandma and became just another household appliance. A convenient free babysitter who could be summoned with a phone call and dismissed just as easily. The pattern became depressingly predictable. Amanda would call on Friday afternoons, her voice honey-sweet with false affection. "Mom, I know this is last minute, but Derek and I really need some couple time. Could you watch Lily this weekend? She's been asking for you." I'd drop everything, cancel my book club, skip my water aerobics class, postpone the grocery shopping, and rush over to their beautiful suburban house in Lincoln Park. The house I'd helped finance with my late husband's life insurance money, though Amanda conveniently forgot that detail whenever she complained about how overwhelming the mortgage payments were. While Amanda and Derek enjoyed their weekend getaways to Wisconsin wine country or romantic dinners at restaurants I could never afford, I'd be home with Lily, trying to stretch my Social Security check to cover the groceries for all three of us. Amanda never left money for food. She'd clean out her refrigerator before leaving, taking anything remotely appealing, and leave me with expired yogurt and wilted lettuce. "There should be some crackers in the pantry," she'd say, already halfway out the door. And Lily doesn't eat much anyway. But Lily was a growing child who deserved better than stale crackers and whatever canned soup I could afford. So I'd spend my own money I needed for my arthritis medication, for my heating bill, for the small dignity of occasionally buying myself something that wasn't marked down for quick sale. I'd take Lily to the grocery store and let her pick out the cereal she wanted, the fruit snacks that made her smile, the chocolate milk that wasn't in my budget but was in my heart. She'd hold my hand in the checkout line, chattering about her favorite cartoons, and for those moments, I'd forget about the credit card balance climbing higher with each purchase. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the way Amanda spoke to me in front of Lily, as if I were a particularly slow employee rather than the woman who'd given her life. "Mom, don't let her watch too much TV," she'd say, not looking up from her phone. "And please try to get her to eat some vegetables. I know you just give her whatever she wants, but she needs proper nutrition." This, from the woman who lived on takeout and energy drinks, who hadn't cooked a real meal since her college dorm days. But I'd nod and smile, because what else could I do? If I defended myself, Amanda would get that look, the one that said I was being difficult and dramatic, and I'd risk losing the precious time with Lily. The manipulation was so subtle, so gradual, that I didn't recognize it until it had become the framework of our entire relationship. Amanda had learned exactly which buttons to push to keep me compliant and grateful for whatever scraps of attention she threw my way. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Mom," she'd say after a particularly demanding weekend, giving me one of those brief, obligatory hugs that felt more like a pat on the head. "You're such a lifesaver." And I'd glow with pride, feeling useful and needed, even as my bank account dwindled and my own needs went unmet. Even as my arthritis worsened from sleeping on their uncomfortable guest room futon. Even as I postponed dental work and eye exams because Amanda's latest crisis had wiped out my emergency fund. The turning point should have been last Christmas. I'd saved for months to buy Lily the American Girl doll she'd been begging for, working extra hours at the church gift shop where I volunteered, carefully setting aside $5 and $10 bills until I had enough for the doll and a few accessories. On Christmas morning, I watched Lily's face light up as she unwrapped the gift. She threw her arms around my neck, whispering, "Thank you, Grandma Dorothy," in my ear with such genuine joy that my heart nearly burst. But Amanda's reaction was swift and cutting. "Mom, you really shouldn't have spent so much. It's just going to make her expect expensive gifts all the time. We're trying to teach her that Christmas isn't about material things." This, while sitting in a living room filled with presents from Amazon packages that had been arriving daily for weeks. This, while wearing the new diamond earrings Derek had given her, the ones that cost more than my entire Christmas budget. The message was clear. My money was welcome, but my judgment was not. My sacrifices were expected, but my decisions were wrong. I started keeping a mental tally after that. Not out of bitterness, but out of a growing sense of disbelief at how completely I'd been taken advantage of. The car repairs I'd paid for when Amanda claimed poverty while posting Instagram photos from expensive restaurants. The daycare fees I'd covered when she decided she needed a mental health day every week. The endless parade of emergencies that always seemed to coincide with something Amanda wanted but couldn't afford. In 5 years, I'd given her over $30,000. Not loaned, given. Because every request came with tears and promises and declarations of love that made saying no feel like child abuse. $30,000 that could have paid for the knee surgery I'd been putting off. That could have covered the dental work I needed, the new glasses I couldn't afford, the hearing aids my doctor had recommended. That could have made my golden years something other than a daily struggle to choose between medication and groceries. But the money wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the way Amanda had trained me to be grateful for the privilege of being used. The way she'd convinced me that being needed was the same thing as being loved. 3 months ago, I'd had what I thought was a heart attack. The chest pain was so severe I couldn't breathe, couldn't stand, couldn't do anything but lie on my kitchen floor and wonder if this was how I'd die. Alone, with no one to find me until the landlord came looking for overdue rent. I'd managed to call 911, and the paramedics determined it was a severe anxiety attack brought on by financial stress and social isolation. At the hospital, when they asked for my emergency contact, I gave them Amanda's number with complete confidence that she'd drop everything to be with me. She never came. Instead, she sent a text. "Glad you're okay. Derek's parents are in town this weekend, so I can't make it to the hospital. Call me when you get home." I was discharged at midnight, took a $40 taxi ride I couldn't afford, and spent the next 3 days recovering alone in my apartment. Amanda called once. A brief conversation where she was clearly distracted, asking if I was back to normal, yet because she needed me to babysit the following weekend. That was when I bought the lottery ticket. Not out of hope, but out of desperation. Standing in the convenience store at 2 in the morning after being discharged from the hospital, I'd looked at those colorful squares of possibility and thought, what if? What if I could stop being afraid of every unexpected expense? What if I could say no without feeling guilty? What if I could discover who I was when I wasn't constantly trying to earn love through financial sacrifice? I'd picked the quick draw option, 5 random numbers that the machine selected for me. The ticket cost $5, money I should have spent on groceries but didn't. 3 days later, those numbers changed everything. And now, sitting on this bus stop bench, abandoned by the daughter I'd bankrupted myself trying to please, I finally understood what I'd been too afraid to admit for years. I hadn't been loving Amanda. I'd been enabling her. And she hadn't been loving me. She'd been using me. The envelope in my purse suddenly felt like a weapon of justice rather than just a piece of paper. For the first time in years, I had power. Real power. The kind that couldn't be manipulated or guilted away. The question was, what was I going to do with it? The bus finally arrived 47 minutes later, and the driver, a kind black man in his 50s with tired eyes, took one look at me and waved me aboard without asking for fare. "No charge today, ma'am," he said quietly. "Just find a seat." Maybe he saw the tears I was trying to hide. Maybe he recognized the particular brand of exhaustion that comes from being discarded by your own family. Or maybe he just had a mother somewhere who deserved better than she was getting. I rode in silence to the pediatric clinic, watching Chicago blur past the window while my mind replayed every small cruelty Amanda had inflicted over the years. The ones that individually seemed insignificant, but together formed a pattern of systematic devaluation that had slowly eroded my sense of self-worth. Like the way she'd started calling me Dorothy instead of Mom when talking to Derek, as if acknowledging our relationship was somehow embarrassing. "Dorothy can watch Lily while we go out," she'd say, standing right next to me as if I were a piece of furniture. "Dorothy doesn't mind staying late." Or the way she'd forget to include me in family photos, claiming later that she didn't want to bother me or that I looked tired. But she never forgot to include me when she needed someone to hold the shopping bags or watch the kids while she posed for the perfect Instagram shot. The clinic's waiting room was crowded with parents and children, the air thick with the scent of hand sanitizer and the sound of coughing. I found Amanda and 5-year-old Lily in the corner. Amanda scrolling through her phone while Lily colored in a tattered coloring book with broken crayons. "There you are," Amanda said without looking up. "I was starting to think you weren't coming." No apology for leaving me stranded. No acknowledgement that she'd abandoned her own mother without money or transportation. Just irritation that I'd taken so long to solve the problem she'd created. "Hi, Grandma Dorothy." Lily jumped up and hugged my legs, her small arms wrapping around me with the pure, uncomplicated love that only children possess. "I missed you." "I missed you too, sweetheart," I whispered, smoothing her hair. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Expensive looking, with hand-embroidered flowers along the hem. The kind of dress that cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. "Like Lily's new dress?" Amanda asked, catching my stare. "Derek's mother bought it for her. She said she wanted to make sure Lily had something appropriate to wear to their country club's family day." The message was clear. Derek's mother was the grandmother who could provide nice things. I was just the babysitter. During the appointment, I sat in the corner while Amanda discussed Lily's behavior with Dr. Peterson. She made it sound like I was the problem, that Lily acted up because I spoiled her and didn't enforce proper boundaries during my babysitting sessions. Dorothy gives her whatever she wants, Amanda said, as if I weren't sitting 3 feet away. I think it's confusing for Lily to have different rules at different places. Different rules. Like making sure she had enough to eat. Like letting her laugh without being told she was too loud. Like treating her with kindness, instead of viewing her as an inconvenience to be managed. Dr. Peterson, to his credit, listened politely, but didn't seem particularly concerned. Lily was a normal, healthy 5-year-old who occasionally pushed boundaries. Hardly cause for alarm, but Amanda persisted, describing my relationship with Lily as if it were some kind of harmful influence that needed to be controlled. After the appointment, instead of taking me home as promised, Amanda announced she had one quick errand to run, then another. Then she needed to stop by Derek's office to drop off some paperwork. Then she had to pick up dry cleaning. Each stop stretched longer than the last, and I found myself standing in parking lots and store aisles, holding Lily's hand while Amanda browsed and chatted on her phone. My knees ached, my back screamed, and my empty stomach cramped with hunger. But whenever I suggested we head home, Amanda would snap that she was almost done, and I needed to be patient. By 4 o'clock, I was exhausted and dizzy from not eating. Lily was getting cranky too, pulling on my coat and whispering that she was hungry. When I asked Amanda if we could stop somewhere for a snack, she rolled her eyes. "We'll eat when we get home," she said. I'm not spending money on overpriced junk food. But we didn't go home. Instead, Amanda drove to an upscale shopping center in Lincoln Park, where she wanted to quickly look for a new purse. She handed me $20 and told me to take Lily to the food court while she shopped. "Try to make it last," she said. "And don't let her get anything too messy." $20. For food for 2 people in one of Chicago's most expensive shopping areas. I spent $18 on a small pizza and drinks, leaving me with $2 and still feeling guilty about the extravagance. While Lily ate, I sat across from her in the busy food court, watching families around us enjoy their meals without calculating every penny. At the next table, a grandmother was sharing ice cream with her granddaughter, both of them laughing at some private joke. The woman was wearing a beautiful wool coat, tasteful jewelry, and had the comfortable confidence of someone who'd never been made to feel like a burden. I wondered what it would be like to be that kind of grandmother, the kind who was cherished rather than tolerated. The kind who could buy her granddaughter ice cream without checking her bank balance first. "Grandma Dorothy, are you sad?" Lily asked, tomato sauce smeared across her cheek. "No, sweetheart," I lied, wiping her face with a napkin. "Grandma's just tired." But I was sad, bone-deep, soul-crushing sad, in a way that felt like drowning in slow motion. Amanda returned 2 hours later, carrying multiple shopping bags and looking refreshed from her retail therapy session. She'd bought herself a $300 purse. I saw the receipt sticking out of the bag, while complaining that money was tight, and I shouldn't spend too much on bus fare. The drive home was the final nail in the coffin of my dignity. Amanda spent the entire 20-minute trip on a phone call with her friend Jessica, using the hands-free system so I was forced to listen to every word. "I'm so exhausted," Amanda complained to Jessica. "I've been dealing with my mother all day and she's just... You know how it is. She needs so much attention, and I feel guilty because I know she's lonely. But God, sometimes I just want to live my own life without feeling responsible for entertaining her." I sat in the passenger seat, invisible, while my daughter discussed me like I was a particularly needy pet that she'd inherited and couldn't quite figure out how to get rid of. "I mean, I love her," Amanda continued, "but she's so dramatic about everything. Like today, she acted like it was the end of the world when I couldn't pick her up exactly on time. And then she was all weird and quiet during Lily's appointment, like she was sulking or something." Jessica's voice crackled through the speakers. "Have you thought about looking into senior living communities? My aunt loves her place. They have activities and other people her age to socialize with." "I've mentioned it," Amanda said, "but she gets all offended like I'm trying to get rid of her. Which I'm not. I just think she'd be happier around people her own age instead of depending on me for everything. Depending on her. As if I were the one making constant demands, instead of her calling me 3 times a week with new requests for money and babysitting. Maybe if you just reduced contact gradually, Jessica suggested. You know, let her get used to being more independent? That's what Derek says. He thinks I enable her too much. Maybe if I stopped rushing over every time she calls, she'd learn to handle things herself. They talked for another 10 minutes about my neediness and dependency, as if I were a troubled teenager instead of the woman who'd given Amanda life, raised her, and continued to support her financially and emotionally, despite receiving nothing but contempt in return. When we finally reached my apartment building, Amanda didn't even put the car in park. "Thanks for helping with Lily today," she said, already reaching for her phone to make another call. "I'll talk to you later." No offer to walk me to the door. No acknowledgement that I'd spent the entire day being her unpaid assistant while she treated me like an inconvenience. Just dismissal, as casual as throwing away a used tissue. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, my knees protesting each step, and collapsed onto my worn sofa. The silence was deafening after a day of being ignored, criticized, and discussed like I wasn't present. That's when I saw the envelope on my coffee table, exactly where I'd left it that morning. The lottery commission envelope that contained proof of my impossible good fortune. With shaking hands, I opened it and read the letter again, making sure I hadn't imagined the numbers. $5.2 million. Winner of the October 15th Mega Millions drawing. Please contact our office to arrange collection of your prize. I sat there for a long time, staring at the letter, feeling something fundamental shift inside my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter, but more profound. A recognition that I had spent years begging for scraps of love from someone who saw me as nothing more than a convenient resource. The phone rang. Amanda's name on the caller ID. "Mom, I forgot to ask. Can you watch Lily this weekend? Derek's taking me to that new spa resort in Wisconsin for our anniversary, and his parents are busy. It would just be Saturday and Sunday. Maybe Monday morning if we decide to stay an extra night." I looked at the letter in my hands, looked at my empty refrigerator, looked at the stack of unpaid bills on my kitchen counter, looked at the photo on my mantle of Amanda's wedding, where I'd paid for the flowers, the cake, and half the reception while she'd forgotten to include me in the official wedding party photos. "Mom, are you there?" For the first time in 5 years, I heard myself say the word I'd been too afraid to use. No. "What?" "No, Amanda, I can't watch Lily this weekend." "But, why not? Do you have plans?" Plans. As if I were allowed to have plans that didn't revolve around her convenience. "I'm not feeling well," I said, which was true. I was sick. Sick of being used. Sick of being dismissed. Sick of mistaking exploitation for love. "Oh." Amanda's voice carried a note of irritation. "Well, I guess I'll have to find someone else. Feel better, I guess." She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in my apartment as darkness fell, holding the lottery letter and asking myself a question that should have been obvious years ago. Was I used? The answer was written in every unpaid loan, every last-minute babysitting request, every time I'd been spoken about rather than spoken to, every time my needs had been dismissed while hers were treated as emergencies. Yes, I had been used. Systematically, deliberately, and without any regard for my dignity or well-being. But now I had something Amanda didn't know about. Something that changed everything. I had the power to say no, and the means to back it up. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The silence that followed my no lasted exactly 18 hours before Amanda launched her counterattack. But it wasn't Amanda who called first. It was Derek, which should have been my first clue that they'd strategized this response together. "Hey, Dorothy." Derek's voice was artificially warm, the tone he used when he needed something from me but wanted to pretend we had a relationship beyond financial convenience. "Amanda mentioned you're not feeling well. Is everything okay?" Derek had never called me before. Not once in the 7 years he'd been with Amanda. Not when his daughter was born. Not on my birthday. Not when I'd been in the hospital with chest pains. But now, when their free babysitting had suddenly become unavailable, He was Mr. Concerned Son-in-Law. I'm fine, Derek. Just tired. Well, the thing is, Dorothy, we really need this weekend. Amanda's been under so much stress lately, and this spa trip has been booked for months. We already paid the non-refundable deposit. The manipulation was so transparent, it almost insulted my intelligence. As if I was supposed to sacrifice my well-being because they'd made plans without checking with their unpaid childcare provider first. I understand, but I can't help this weekend. Look, I know Amanda can be demanding sometimes, but you have to understand, she's just overwhelmed. Being a working mother is really hard, and she depends on you so much. You're like the backbone of our family, the backbone, not a cherished grandmother or beloved mother-in-law, a structural support system that was expected to bear weight without complaint. Maybe you could ask Derek's parents, I suggested, or hire a babysitter. My parents live in Florida now, and babysitters cost like $20 an hour. We can't afford that on top of the spa weekend. But they could afford a $300 purse. They could afford dinner at restaurants I'd never seen the inside of. They could afford a house in Lincoln Park and 2 car payments and annual vacations to Mexico. They just couldn't afford to pay for the childcare that would free them to enjoy all those luxuries. I'm sorry, Derek, but my answer is still no. The line went quiet for a long moment. When Derek spoke again, his voice had lost its artificial warmth. You know what? Fine. I guess Amanda was right about you becoming difficult in your old age. We'll figure something else out. He hung up before I could respond, but his words echoed in my empty apartment long after the dial tone stopped. Difficult. As if setting a single boundary after years of compliance was evidence of senility rather than sanity. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, it was Amanda, and she'd abandoned all pretense of civility. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she snapped without preamble. "Derek is furious, and honestly, so am I. You've never said no to watching Lily before. What's changed?" "Nothing's changed, Amanda. I'm just not available this weekend." "That's bullshit, and you know it. You sit in that apartment doing nothing all day, every day. The one weekend, that I ask for help, and suddenly you're too busy?" The cruelty of that statement took my breath away. Doing nothing, as if my life had no value beyond serving her needs. As if the woman who'd raised 3 children, worked 2 jobs for 20 years, and continued to volunteer at the church food bank was somehow worthless because she wasn't currently earning money or raising babies. I volunteer at the church, Amanda. I have book club and water aerobics and— Oh, please. Book club and water aerobics aren't real commitments. Those are just ways for lonely old people to fill time. Lonely old people. Her own mother, reduced to a stereotype designed to dismiss and diminish. Amanda, I've watched Lily every weekend for the past month. I've given you thousands of dollars over the years. I think I'm entitled to say no occasionally. Thousands of dollars? Her voice pitched higher, taking on the victimized tone she used when caught in uncomfortable truths. Mom, those weren't gifts. Those were emergencies. And I never asked you to keep track like some kind of loan shark. I'm not keeping track to guilt you. I'm just saying that maybe I've done enough to earn a weekend to myself. A weekend to yourself to do what? Sit alone and feel sorry for yourself? God, Mom. Sometimes I think you just like being miserable. The conversation devolved from there, Amanda cycling through every manipulation tactic in her arsenal. Guilt, anger, false victimhood, and finally, the nuclear option. Fine. If this is how you want to be, maybe we need to take a break from each other. Maybe you need some time to think about whether being part of this family is actually important to you. Being part of this family. As if I were an optional member rather than the woman who'd created it. Maybe I do need some time to think, I heard myself say. Amanda's sharp intake of breath suggested she'd expected me to crumble under the threat of abandonment. When I didn't immediately backtrack and apologize, her voice turned ice cold. Well then, I guess we'll see how much you enjoy your precious independence when you're spending holidays alone. She hung up, leaving me sitting in my kitchen with my hands shaking and my heart pounding. But underneath the fear and hurt was something else. Something that felt almost like relief. For the first time in years, I had a weekend with no obligations, no demands, no one treating me like hired help. And instead of the crushing loneliness Amanda had predicted, I felt something I'd almost forgotten: peace. But Amanda wasn't finished with her campaign. Over the next few days, she enlisted reinforcements. First was my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who knocked on my door Tuesday evening with a concerned expression and a plate of cookies I didn't remember asking for. "Dorothy, dear, I hope you don't mind me saying, but Amanda called me yesterday. She's worried about you." Mrs. Patterson was 83 and meant well, but she'd also never had children and didn't understand the complexities of family manipulation. In her generation, children were expected to be grateful, and parents were expected to sacrifice without complaint. "She thinks you might be going through some kind of episode," Mrs. Patterson continued delicately. "She mentioned that you've been acting strangely lately, refusing to help with your granddaughter, that sort of thing." An episode. Amanda had actually told my neighbor that I was having a mental health crisis because I'd said no to one babysitting request. "I'm fine, Mrs. Patterson. Just tired." "Well, of course you are, dear. But family is family, isn't it? Maybe you were just having a bad day when she called." The next day brought a visit from Father Martinez from St. Catherine's, where I'd been volunteering for 15 years. He appeared at my door with the slightly embarrassed expression of someone who'd been asked to perform an intervention he didn't quite understand. "Dorothy, I hope this isn't overstepping, but your daughter contacted me. She's concerned that you might be struggling with some depression or isolation." Amanda had called my priest. She'd actually involved my church in her manipulation campaign, painting me as a mentally unstable elderly woman who needed intervention because I'd set a single boundary. "She mentioned that you've been rejecting family time and social interaction," Father Martinez continued gently. "I know the isolation of recent years has been hard on many of our parishioners. Would you like to talk about what's troubling you?" I appreciated Father Martinez's kindness, but the manipulation was breathtaking in its scope. Amanda had systematically contacted people in my life, spinning a narrative that painted my first act of self-advocacy as evidence of mental decline. But the final straw came Thursday evening, when my phone rang and I saw a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was young, professional, and carefully neutral. "Ms. Williams, this is Sarah Chen from Chicago Elder Services. We received a call from a family member expressing concern about your welfare and ability to care for yourself independently." My blood turned to ice. Amanda had called Adult Protective Services on me. She'd actually reported her own mother as a potentially vulnerable adult who might need state intervention. "The caller indicated that you've been showing signs of confusion, social withdrawal, and inability to maintain family relationships," the social worker continued. "They're concerned that you might be experiencing some cognitive decline or depression that's affecting your judgment." I sat in stunned silence, holding the phone with trembling hands, while this stranger explained that someone would need to visit my apartment to assess my situation and determine whether I needed services or supervision. Amanda had weaponized the very system designed to protect elderly people against their own families. She'd turned my single no into evidence of incompetence that could potentially result in loss of independence, forced medical evaluations, or even guardianship proceedings. The social worker was kind but thorough, asking questions about my daily routines, my medical care, my social connections, my financial management. Questions designed to determine whether I was a danger to myself or vulnerable to exploitation. The irony was devastating. While this woman assessed whether I was being taken advantage of, the person who'd been systematically exploiting me for years was the one who'd made the report. After I hung up, I sat in my darkened living room and finally understood the full scope of what I was dealing with. This wasn't just a spoiled daughter having a tantrum because she couldn't get her way. This was a calculated campaign to destroy my reputation, isolate me from my support systems, and potentially strip away my independence. All because I'd said no to one weekend of free babysitting. I pulled out the lottery letter and read it again, the numbers blurring through my tears. $5. $2 million. Enough money to ensure that I'd never have to depend on anyone again. Enough power to turn the tables on someone who'd clearly never expected me to have any leverage of my own. But the money wasn't just about financial independence anymore. It was about something much more fundamental: the right to be treated with basic human dignity by my own child. Amanda had declared war on me for the crime of having boundaries. She'd involved my neighbors, my priest, and state services in her campaign to paint me as incompetent. She'd made it clear that in her mind, I had no right to autonomy, no right to say no, no right to exist as anything other than a resource for her to exploit. But she'd made one crucial mistake in her calculations. She'd assumed I was powerless. Tomorrow, I was going to show her exactly how wrong she was. The time for being the victim in this relationship was over. The time for taking back my power had finally arrived, and I was going to enjoy every minute of it. Friday morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The lottery letter sat on my nightstand where I'd placed it the night before, and for the first time since receiving it, I felt ready to claim what was mine. At 9 a.m. sharp, I called the Illinois State Lottery Commission. "Ms. Williams," the representative said after verifying my identity, "congratulations on your win. Are you ready to begin the prize claim process?" "Yes," I said, and the word felt like the first honest thing I'd said in months. "I'm ready." The process would take 2 weeks to complete. Background checks, tax documentation, media release decisions. I chose the lump sum payment option, which would give me approximately $3.2 million after taxes. Still more money than I'd ever dreamed of having, and more importantly, enough to ensure I'd never be dependent on anyone again. "We'll need you to come in next Friday to sign the final paperwork," the representative explained. "And, Ms. Williams, you might want to consider speaking with a financial advisor before then. This kind of windfall can be overwhelming." Overwhelming. She had no idea. I spent the rest of that morning doing something I hadn't done in years, making plans for myself. Real plans, based on what I wanted instead of what other people needed from me. First, I called Dr. Martinez, the orthopedic surgeon who'd been recommending knee replacement surgery for 2 years. Surgery I'd been putting off because I couldn't afford the recovery time without income, and because Amanda needed me available for constant babysitting. "I'd like to schedule the surgery," I told his receptionist, "as soon as possible." "Wonderful, Mrs. Williams. Dr. Martinez has been hoping you'd reconsider. How does 3 weeks from today sound?" 3 weeks. By then, I'd have the lottery money, and more importantly, I'd be free from the obligation to drop everything whenever Amanda called. Next, I called St. Catherine's and spoke with Father Martinez. Not about Amanda's manipulation campaign, but about the church's scholarship fund for single mothers returning to school. "I'd like to make a donation," I said. "A substantial one. Can we meet next week to discuss the details?" "Dorothy, that's wonderful. The scholarship fund has been so underfunded lately. Even a small donation would make a tremendous difference." "It won't be small, Father. I think you'll be surprised." Then I did something that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. I went shopping. Not for groceries or household necessities, but for myself. I took the bus to Michigan Avenue and walked into stores I'd only ever window shopped at. Stores where the price tags used to make me dizzy with anxiety. At Nordstrom, I bought myself a beautiful wool coat in deep navy blue, the kind of classic, well-made garment I'd always admired but never thought I deserved. It cost more than I used to spend on clothes in an entire year. But when I tried it on and looked in the three-way mirror, I saw a woman who looked dignified, confident, worthy of respect. The salesperson, a young woman named Jennifer, helped me pick out a coordinating scarf and gloves. She didn't know I was about to become a millionaire. To her, I was just another customer deserving of attention and courtesy. The way she treated me, with professional kindness and genuine helpfulness, reminded me how it felt to be valued for something other than my usefulness. "You look beautiful in that color," Jennifer said as she rang up my purchases. "Navy is so elegant on you." Beautiful. When was the last time anyone had called me beautiful? When was the last time I'd felt beautiful? I wore the new coat home, feeling like I was inhabiting a different version of myself. The woman who walked up the stairs to her apartment wasn't the same one who'd been abandoned at a bus stop a week ago. This woman had power, dignity, and most importantly, choices. That evening, I sat down with a legal pad and began making lists. Not grocery lists or errand lists, but life lists. Things I wanted to do, places I wanted to see, changes I wanted to make. Buy a house near the lake, take art classes, travel to Ireland, where my grandmother had been born, learn to use a computer properly, join a book club at the library downtown, not just the church group where everyone was afraid to discuss anything controversial. For the first time in decades, I was planning a life instead of just surviving one. But the real test came Saturday evening when Amanda called. I almost didn't answer. My new coat hung in the closet, my surgery was scheduled, and I'd spent the day reading travel brochures instead of waiting for her to need something. I felt good, peaceful, like a person instead of a service provider. But old habits die hard, and I picked up on the fourth ring. Mom. Amanda's voice was different, still cold, but with an undertone of uncertainty. I wanted to call and check on you. Make sure you're okay. She'd never called just to check on me. This was reconnaissance, an attempt to gauge whether her psychological campaign had worked, whether I'd been sufficiently punished and was ready to return to my role as family doormat. I'm fine, Amanda. Better than fine, actually. Good. That's good. A pause. So, I was thinking, maybe we overreacted a little bit this week. You know how stress can make people say things they don't mean. People. As if we'd both been equally awful to each other. As if my crime of saying no once was equivalent to her campaign of character assassination. Maybe we could try again, she continued. Derek's parents fell through for this weekend, so if you're feeling better, I'm not available, Amanda. What do you mean you're not available? It's Saturday night. What could you possibly be doing? The assumption in her voice, that my life was so empty and meaningless that I couldn't possibly have legitimate plans, sparked something fierce inside my chest. I'm reading, I said simply. Reading? Mom, reading isn't a commitment. You can read any time. This is important. My reading is important to me. This is ridiculous. You're being ridiculous. One book isn't more important than your granddaughter. And there it was, the manipulation tactic that had worked for years, making it about Lily instead of about Amanda's convenience, implying that saying no to Amanda meant rejecting Lily. Lily is always welcome to visit me, I said calmly, but I'm not available for babysitting this weekend. Visit you? Mom, your apartment is tiny, and you don't have anything for kids to do there. It's not exactly child-friendly. My apartment. The place I'd lived for 8 years, where I'd hosted countless family dinners, where Lily had spent hundreds of happy hours coloring at my kitchen table and helping me bake cookies. Suddenly it was inadequate because it served my needs instead of Amanda's. Then perhaps you should have thought about childcare arrangements before making your plans, I suggested. The silence that followed was so long, I wondered if she'd hung up. When Amanda spoke again, her voice was tight with barely controlled anger. I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but this isn't like you. You're acting selfish and mean. The social worker said that personality changes can be a sign of... The social worker you called on me? I interrupted. The one you sent to my home because I said no to babysitting once? I was worried about you. You were acting strange, and I thought... You thought you'd have me declared incompetent because I set a boundary. That's not... I never said anything about incompetent. I just told them you seemed confused and isolated. Confused because I have my own opinions? Isolated because I'm not available to serve you 24/7? Mom, you're twisting everything around. I'm trying to help you. No, Amanda. You're trying to control me. And I'm done being controlled. Another long silence. When she spoke again, Amanda's voice carried a tone I'd never heard before. Uncertainty mixed with something that might have been respect. Fine. If this is how you want things to be, then fine. But don't come crying to me when you realize how lonely independence really is. She hung up, but this time her threats felt empty. The woman who was afraid of being alone was the old Dorothy. The one who thought being needed was the same as being loved. The new Dorothy, the one wearing a beautiful coat and planning knee surgery and reading travel brochures, wasn't afraid of loneliness anymore, because I was learning the difference between being alone and being free. Sunday morning, I woke up naturally instead of to the sound of my phone ringing with demands. I made myself a proper breakfast, not toast grabbed on the way out the door to another emergency, but actual eggs and bacon, eaten at my kitchen table while reading the Sunday paper. The advice column featured a letter from someone my age, asking how to deal with adult children who only called when they needed money. The columnist's response was gentle but firm. You teach people how to treat you by what you're willing to accept. I cut out that column and pinned it to my refrigerator, next to my grocery list and appointment reminders. A daily reminder that respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you require. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a walk through Lincoln Park just because I wanted to. Not to run errands or fulfill obligations, but for the simple pleasure of moving through the world at my own pace. The October air was crisp and clean, and the trees were just beginning to turn colors. Families played in the park. Couples walked dogs. Elderly people sat on benches feeding pigeons. Normal people living normal lives, untainted by the toxic dynamics I'd mistaken for love. I sat on a bench near the pond and watched children play on the playground while their parents chatted nearby. Real parents, I noticed, who looked happy to be with their kids instead of burdened by them, who spoke to each other with kindness instead of irritation. A little girl with curly hair ran up to her grandmother, who was sitting 2 benches away. "Grandma, look what I found," she said, holding up a perfect red leaf. "Oh my goodness," the grandmother said, examining the leaf with serious attention. "This is absolutely beautiful. Should we take it home and press it in a book?" The little girl nodded enthusiastically and climbed onto the bench to snuggle against her grandmother's side. They sat there together, the grandmother's arm around the child, both of them completely content in each other's company. That's what it should look like, I realized. That easy affection, that mutual joy in each other's presence. Not the tense negotiations and one-sided sacrifices that had characterized my relationship with Amanda and Lily. Walking home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation for tomorrow. Not anxiety about what demands might come, but actual excitement about the possibilities ahead. I had a new coat that made me feel beautiful. I had surgery scheduled that would relieve years of pain. I had money that would guarantee my independence. I had plans that served my own dreams instead of other people's convenience. Most importantly, I had something I'd lost somewhere along the way: respect for myself. Amanda thought she was punishing me with her silence and withdrawal. She had no idea she was giving me the greatest gift possible: freedom from the exhausting work of trying to earn love from someone incapable of giving it. For the first time in years, I was discovering who Dorothy Williams actually was when she wasn't busy being what everyone else needed her to be. And I liked her. The Lottery Commission office in downtown Chicago was nothing like I'd imagined. Instead of some grand marble-columned building with fanfare and photographers, it was a modest office in a government complex, with fluorescent lights and beige carpeting that had seen better days. But when I signed my name on that final document and the check was placed in my hands, it felt like the most important moment of my life. $3.2 million after taxes. More than enough to rewrite every rule that had governed my existence for the past decade. "Congratulations, Ms. Williams," said Janet Morrison, the lottery representative who'd guided me through the process. "Do you have any plans for your winnings?" "Yes," I said, folding the check carefully and placing it in my purse. The same worn leather purse that had carried my last few dollars just 2 weeks ago. "I have very specific plans." The first stop was the bank, where I opened a new account and deposited the check. The bank manager, Mr. Harrison, treated me with a respect I hadn't experienced in years. Suddenly, every service was available, every option was explained in detail, every courtesy was extended. Money, I realized, was more than financial security. It was dignity. It was choices. It was the power to be treated like a person who mattered. From the bank, I went to see Margaret Donnelly, the real estate agent I'd contacted the week before. Margaret was a brisk, efficient woman in her 50s who specialized in lakefront properties for Chicago's more discerning buyers. "I found several properties that match your criteria," she said, spreading photos across her desk. "All are within walking distance of Lake Michigan. All have excellent security, and all are in buildings with strong homeowner associations." The condo I chose was on the 14th floor of a building in Gold Coast, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered an unobstructed view of the lake. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a modern kitchen, and most importantly, a doorman who would ensure that visitors were announced before being allowed upstairs. No more surprise visits. No more people assuming they could show up and demand my time. From now on, access to Dorothy Williams would be by invitation only. "I'll take it," I said, and Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly at how quickly I'd made the decision. Don't you want to think about it? Discuss it with family? No, I said firmly. This is my decision alone. The cash purchase meant I could move in within 30 days. 30 days to completely remake my life, to establish new patterns and boundaries before anyone could interfere. But Amanda didn't wait 30 days. 3 days after I'd signed the real estate papers, she showed up at my apartment. I saw her through the peephole, standing in the hallway with that particular expression she wore when she was about to deliver an ultimatum. Lily was with her, looking small and confused in the fluorescent hallway lighting. I almost didn't open the door. The old Dorothy would have been terrified of confrontation, would have hidden inside until they went away. But the new Dorothy, the one with $3.2 million and a lakefront condo and surgery scheduled for next week, opened the door calmly. Amanda. Lily. Mom, we need to talk. Amanda pushed past me into the apartment without being invited, pulling Lily behind her. Lily, go color at Grandma's table while Mommy and Grandma have a grown-up conversation. Lily looked between us uncertainly, clearly sensing the tension, before settling at my kitchen table with the crayons I kept there for her visits. She began drawing with the intense concentration that children use to avoid adult drama they don't understand. This has gone far enough, Amanda announced, standing in my living room like a prosecutor addressing a jury. I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but this whole rebellion thing is affecting Lily, and I won't stand for it. What rebellion thing? Don't play dumb, Mom. The attitude, the refusal to help with Lily, the way you've been acting like you're too good for your own family. It stops now. She began pacing my small living room, building up to what was clearly a rehearsed speech. Derek must have coached her, I realized. This wasn't spontaneous anger. This was strategic manipulation. I've been patient with you, Amanda continued. I've tried to understand whatever midlife crisis or depression or whatever this is. But Lily asks for you constantly, and I'm tired of having to explain why Grandma Dorothy doesn't want to see her anymore. The accusation hit like a physical blow, and I felt my carefully maintained composure waver. She was using Lily as a weapon, making my boundary setting sound like rejection of my granddaughter rather than refusal to be exploited. I never said I didn't want to see Lily. Actions speak louder than words, Mom. When was the last time you called to check on us? When was the last time you offered to help with anything? You've completely withdrawn from this family. I've been available every time you've asked for help for 5 years, Amanda. Taking 1 week to myself doesn't constitute withdrawal. 1 week? Try 3 weeks. 3 weeks of nothing. No calls, no offers to babysit, no asking how we're doing. Do you have any idea how selfish that sounds? Selfish. The word she'd been building toward. The ultimate accusation designed to make me crumble with guilt and resume my role as family doormat. From the kitchen table, Lily's small voice piped up. Are you and Grandma Dorothy fighting? Amanda's expression immediately softened as she turned toward her daughter. No, sweetie. Mommy and Grandma are just having a discussion. Keep coloring your pretty picture. But when she turned back to me, her face hardened again. See what you're doing? You're confusing her with this whole act. What act? This ridiculous independence thing. Mom, you're 68 years old. You live alone in a tiny apartment. You have no friends except old church ladies. And your only family is us. What exactly do you think this independence is going to get you? She was trying to make me feel pathetic, isolated, completely dependent on her for any meaning in my life. A month ago, it would have worked. A month ago, I would have apologized and begged for forgiveness and promised to resume my role as unpaid servant. But a month ago, I wasn't a millionaire with a lakefront condo and surgery scheduled and plans to travel to Ireland. My independence is going to get me a life, I said quietly. Amanda laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. A life? Mom, this is your life. Lily and Derek and me, we're your life. Everything else is just filler. No, Amanda, you've been my whole life. And that was the problem. She stopped pacing and stared at me, clearly not expecting direct confrontation. What's that supposed to mean? It means I've spent the last 5 years arranging my entire existence around your convenience. I've given you money I couldn't afford, time I didn't have, and energy I needed for myself. And in return, you've treated me like hired help that you don't have to pay. That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time you called just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you invited me somewhere that didn't involve babysitting? When was the last time you treated me like a person instead of a service provider? Amanda's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She couldn't answer because the answer was never. You called Adult Protective Services on me, Amanda, your own mother, because I said no to one weekend of babysitting. I was worried about you. You were acting strange. I was acting like a person with boundaries. That shouldn't be strange behavior, but apparently it was so foreign to you that you thought I needed professional intervention. From the kitchen, Lily called out, "Grandma Dorothy, can you help me with this dog? I can't make the ears right." I walked over to the table, grateful for the interruption. Lily had drawn a picture of what looked like our family, stick figures holding hands under a rainbow, but one figure stood apart from the others, and when I looked closer, I realized it was me. "This is beautiful, sweetheart," I said, helping her add ears to the dog. "Tell me about your picture." "It's our family," Lily said proudly. "There's Mommy and Daddy and me, and there's you. But you're over here because Mommy says you don't want to play with us anymore." My heart broke a little, seeing how Amanda had poisoned even this innocent relationship, but it also strengthened my resolve. Lily deserved better than to be raised by someone who used emotional manipulation as a parenting tool. "Lily," I said gently, "I will always want to spend time with you, but from now on, when you visit Grandma, it will be because we both want to see each other, not because someone needs babysitting." What does babysitting mean? It means taking care of someone else's children while they go do other things. But when you visit me, it won't be babysitting. It will be grandma and granddaughter time. Amanda had been listening to this exchange with growing agitation. "Don't confuse her with your psychological games, Mom. I'm not playing games. I'm setting boundaries." "Boundaries? You're destroying this family with your selfishness, and you call it boundaries?" That's when I made the decision I'd been building toward for 3 weeks. I walked to my bedroom and returned with a manila envelope. Inside were copies of the lottery check, photos of my new condo, and a letter I'd written but hadn't been sure I'd have the courage to deliver. "Amanda, I want you to look at something." I handed her the envelope and watched her face change as she processed what she was seeing. The lottery check, the real estate documents, the proof that everything she thought she knew about my circumstances had changed completely. You won the lottery?" Her voice was barely a whisper. $5.2 million. I won it the day before you left me at the bus stop with no money. The color drained from Amanda's face as the implications hit her. All those times she'd told me money was tight. All those lectures about not spending too much. All those assumptions about my dependence on her generosity. You were rich this whole time, and you didn't tell me? I wanted to see if you could love me when you thought I had nothing to offer except free labor. Amanda sank into my chair, still staring at the documents. "I don't understand." "You failed the test, Amanda. Every single day for 3 weeks, you proved that you only valued me for what I could do for you. The moment I became inconvenient, you tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. Mom, if I had known..." "What?" "You would have treated me better. You would have been kinder. You would have respected my boundaries." She didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. She would have been kinder, but only because she thought I had something she wanted. "I'm moving into a new condo next month," I continued. "I'm having surgery that will finally fix my knees. I'm going to travel, take art classes, maybe learn to use a computer properly. I'm going to live. What about us? What about Lily?" I looked at my granddaughter, still coloring peacefully at the kitchen table, and felt my heart break a little more. Lily will always be welcome in my life, but she'll visit because we love each other, not because you need free childcare. And you, Amanda. I paused, gathering the courage for what came next. You need to decide if you want a relationship with your mother, or if you just want a servant you don't have to pay. The silence that followed was deafening. Amanda stared at the lottery documents like they might change if she looked long enough. Lily hummed softly as she colored, and I stood in my small apartment, feeling more powerful than I'd ever felt in my life. Finally, Amanda looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "I never meant to. I didn't realize." "Yes, you did," I said gently but firmly. You knew exactly what you were doing. You just never thought I'd have the power to stop you. 6 weeks after the confrontation, I stood in my new living room, watching the sunrise paint Lake Michigan in shades of gold and pink. The floor-to-ceiling windows of my Gold Coast condo offered an unobstructed view of the water, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The knee surgery had been a complete success. Dr. Martinez had replaced both joints, and after 3 weeks of physical therapy, I was walking without pain for the first time in a decade. The woman who'd once struggled to climb the stairs to her cramped apartment now walked confidently along the lakefront path every morning, her body finally matching the strength she'd discovered in her spirit. My new home was nothing like the tiny apartment where I'd spent so many years feeling invisible. The walls were painted in warm cream tones that reflected the natural light. The furniture was carefully chosen for comfort and beauty. A soft gray sectional where I could read without backaches. A dining table made of rich walnut where I ate meals that I'd prepared for myself, at my own pace, according to my own preferences. The second bedroom had become my art studio. I'd enrolled in watercolor classes at the Art Institute, fulfilling a dream I'd harbored since high school, but never had the time or money to pursue. My instructor, Professor Elena Vasquez, was a patient woman in her 70s who understood that creativity had no expiration date. "You have a natural eye for color," she'd told me during my third lesson, examining my tentative painting of the lake view from my window. "Don't be afraid to be bold. Art is about expressing what you see and feel, not what you think you should see and feel." Bold. The word had become my personal mantra. After decades of making myself small, quiet, and convenient, I was learning to take up space in the world. The changes weren't just physical or artistic. I'd discovered that when you stop arranging your entire life around other people's emergencies, you have time to develop actual interests and relationships. I'd joined a book club at the downtown library, where we discussed literature that challenged and inspired rather than simply passing time. I'd started volunteering at a literacy center, teaching adults to read, using my natural patience and kindness to serve people who appreciated rather than exploited those qualities. Most surprisingly, I'd made friends, real friends, who called to check on me not because they needed something, but because they enjoyed my company. Margaret from my book club had become a regular coffee companion. Dr. Sarah Chen from the Literacy Center had invited me to join her walking group. Professor Vasquez had included me in her monthly art gallery outings with other students. These relationships felt different from anything I'd experienced with Amanda. They were reciprocal. We gave and received equally, supported each other's interests, celebrated each other's successes without jealousy or competition. When Margaret's husband had been hospitalized, I'd brought her meals and sat with her in the waiting room. When Sarah's daughter graduated from college, we'd all celebrated together. When I'd sold my first watercolor painting at a local art fair, they'd been genuinely thrilled for my success. This, I realized, was what healthy relationships looked like. This was what it meant to be valued for who you were, rather than what you could provide. But the most profound change was in how I saw myself. The woman who looked back at me from mirrors now stood straighter, dressed in clothes that made her feel confident rather than invisible. I'd gotten a new haircut, a stylish bob that framed my face instead of the severe bun I'd worn for years because it was practical. I wore colors that brought out my eyes, jewelry that sparkled in the light, shoes that were both comfortable and attractive. I'd even bought a car, an elegant silver sedan that made me feel independent and capable. No more waiting for buses or depending on others for transportation. No more sitting on cold benches hoping someone would remember to pick me up. The financial security was liberating in ways I'd never imagined. I could afford organic groceries, quality health care, cultural events, and small luxuries that made daily life more pleasant. But more than the material comfort was the psychological freedom, the knowledge that I never again had to choose between paying for medication and paying for food, never again had to say yes to exploitation because I was afraid of being cut off from financial support. 3 months after moving into my new home, I did something I'd dreamed about for decades. I booked a trip to Ireland. Not a budget tour with strangers, but a carefully planned 2-week journey to explore the countryside where my grandmother had been born. I'd hired a private guide, booked stays in charming bed and breakfasts, and planned to spend my 70th birthday walking through the village where my family's story had begun. The night before my departure, I sat in my art studio working on a new painting, a landscape of rolling Irish hills based on photographs I'd studied online. The phone rang, and I almost didn't answer it. These days, I only accepted calls from people whose company I enjoyed, and unknown numbers usually went to voicemail, but something made me pick up on the third ring. "Dorothy?" The voice was hesitant, uncertain. It's Amanda." I'd spoken to Amanda exactly twice since the confrontation 6 weeks ago. Both conversations had been brief and strained, focused on arranging supervised visits with Lily at neutral locations like the Children's Museum or the zoo. Amanda had been formally polite but distant, clearly struggling with the new dynamic where she couldn't make demands or assume availability. "Hello, Amanda. I heard from Lily that you're going to Ireland tomorrow." "That's right. She said you showed her pictures of castles and told her about your grandmother's village." "I did." A long pause. Then, I need to say something before you leave." I waited, painting forgotten in my hands. "I've been seeing a therapist," Amanda said finally. "Dr. Williams at Northwestern. She specializes in family dynamics and she's helped me understand some things about how I've been treating you." This was unexpected. In all the years I'd known Amanda, she'd never admitted to needing professional help with anything. "I'm glad you're getting support," I said carefully. "Dorothy, Mom, I need you to know that I'm sorry. Really, genuinely sorry. Not because you have money now, but because I finally understand what I put you through." The words hung in the air between us. I'd dreamed of hearing an apology for so long, but now that it was happening, I felt more cautious than relieved. "What exactly are you sorry for?" "All of it. The way I took advantage of your kindness. The way I made you feel like you had to earn my love. The way I used Lily to manipulate you. The way I called Adult Protective Services because I was angry that you finally stood up for yourself." Her voice broke slightly on the last words. "Dr. Williams helped me see that I was treating you like an employee rather than my mother. That I'd created this system where you had to keep proving your worth to me, but I never had to prove anything to you." I set down my paintbrush and walked to the window, looking out at the lake where lights from boats twinkled like stars. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I don't want you to leave for Ireland thinking that I don't know what I did wrong. I don't want you to spend your birthday in another country believing that your own daughter never saw your value." "And what do you want from me, Amanda?" Another long pause. "I want to earn back your trust. I want to learn how to be a daughter instead of just someone who takes from you. I want Lily to grow up knowing her grandmother as a person, not just as someone who provides services. That's going to take time." "I know. Dr. Williams says rebuilding relationships after emotional abuse takes years, not months. And that's what I did, Mom. I emotionally abused you. I can't pretend anymore that it was just thoughtlessness or stress." The admission was startling in its honesty. I'd expected denials, justifications, attempts to minimize what had happened. Instead, Amanda was using clinical terms to describe her behavior, accepting full responsibility in a way she'd never done before. "I can't promise that I'll be able to trust you again," I said quietly. "I know, but I want to try. I want to do the work to become someone worthy of your trust, whether you decide to let me or not." I stood there in my beautiful studio, in my beautiful home, looking out at the beautiful view I'd purchased with my independence, and felt something shift inside my chest. Not forgiveness. That would take much longer, if it came at all, but something softer than the anger I'd been carrying. "I'm leaving for Ireland tomorrow," I said. "When I come back, we can talk about what rebuilding might look like." "Really?" "Really. But Amanda, it will be on my terms, at my pace, with my boundaries. I'm not the same person who used to say yes to everything." "I know. I'm glad you're not." After we hung up, I sat in my studio for a long time, processing the conversation. The old Dorothy would have immediately forgiven, would have rushed back into the familiar pattern of giving too much and expecting too little. But the new Dorothy, the one who'd learned to value herself, was willing to be patient, to let trust be earned rather than freely given. Maybe Amanda would do the work to become someone I could have a healthy relationship with. Maybe she wouldn't. Either way, I would be fine. I had built a life that didn't depend on her love or approval. I had friends, interests, purpose, and joy that belonged to me alone. The next morning, I wheeled my suitcase through O'Hare International Airport, wearing a new traveling outfit and carrying a leather purse that hadn't been chosen for practicality, but for how it made me feel. Confident, worthy, ready for adventure. As the plane lifted off, I looked down at Chicago growing smaller below and felt a profound sense of completion. The woman who'd been abandoned at a bus stop 6 months ago had died in that moment of humiliation. The woman flying to Ireland to celebrate her 70th birthday had been born from that ashes of that abandonment. I opened my journal and wrote, "Today, I begin the next chapter of my life, not as someone's daughter, mother, or grandmother, but as Dorothy Catherine Williams, a woman who knows her own worth and refuses to accept less than she deserves." The plane banked west toward the Atlantic, carrying me toward a country I'd dreamed of visiting since childhood, toward a birthday celebration that was truly mine, toward a future that belonged entirely to me. For the first time in my life, I was completely free, and it felt like coming home to myself. 1 year later, I stood in the kitchen of my lakefront condo, preparing dinner for a very special guest. The October evening was crisp and clear, and the lake sparkled like diamonds in the setting sun. The woman who looked back at me from the reflection in the window was someone I barely recognized from 2 years ago. Confident, radiant, at peace with herself and her choices. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock, and I opened it to find Lily standing in the hallway, holding a handmade card and practically vibrating with excitement. "Grandma Dorothy, I made this for you at school." She thrust the card into my hands, a colorful creation covered in glitter and stickers that proclaimed, "Happy birthday to the best grandma ever." Behind her stood Amanda, looking nervous but genuinely hopeful. Over the past year, she'd been true to her word about therapy and change. Our relationship was still cautious, still rebuilding, but it was built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than exploitation. "Happy birthday, Mom," Amanda said, handing me a small wrapped package. 71 looks good on you." I invited them in, and Lily immediately ran to the windows to look out at the lake. "It's so pretty, Grandma. Can we see your paintings after dinner?" "Of course, sweetheart. I just finished a new one of the Irish countryside. The past year had been the most fulfilling of my life. My trip to Ireland had been everything I'd dreamed and more. 2 weeks of exploring ancient castles, walking through emerald fields, and tracing my grandmother's footsteps through the village where she'd been born. I'd even met distant cousins who still lived there, warm and welcoming people who treated me like family without expecting anything in return. I'd returned from that trip with a camera full of photographs and a heart full of inspiration. My watercolor paintings had improved dramatically, and I'd even had a small exhibition at a local gallery. 3 of my Irish landscape paintings had sold, and the money wasn't important. It was the validation that my art had value, that at 70 years old, I was still capable of creating something beautiful. The literacy center where I volunteered had become like a second home. Teaching adults to read was deeply rewarding work, and my students had become some of my closest friends. Last month, I'd watched Marcus, a 60-year-old janitor, read his first complete novel aloud to the class. There hadn't been a dry eye in the room. My social circle had expanded in ways I'd never imagined possible. The book club had led to a hiking group, which had led to a cooking class, which had led to a travel club that was planning a trip to Tuscany next spring. I'd discovered that when you're not constantly responding to other people's crises, you have time to develop genuine interests and relationships. But perhaps the most surprising development had been with Amanda. True to her word, she'd continued therapy and had done the difficult work of examining her behavior patterns. She'd started paying me back for the money she'd borrowed over the years, not because I'd asked for it, but because she'd realized that true relationships require reciprocity. More importantly, she'd learned to ask instead of demand, to respect my boundaries instead of testing them, to value my time instead of assuming it belonged to her. "How was your book club meeting yesterday?" Amanda asked as we sat down to dinner. It was a simple question, but it represented a profound shift. She was asking about my life because she was genuinely interested, not because she was looking for an opening to make a request. "Wonderful," I said, serving the salmon I'd prepared. We're reading Maya Angelou next month. Margaret suggested it, and I'm excited to discuss it with the group. I love Maya Angelou, Amanda said. Maybe I could borrow the book when you're done. I haven't read much poetry lately. 2 years ago, Amanda would have mocked my book club as lonely old ladies with nothing better to do. Now she was asking to borrow my books because she valued my recommendations. Lily chattered about school and her friends, and I found myself actually listening instead of mentally preparing for whatever request would inevitably follow. These dinners had become a monthly tradition, just the three of us, with no agenda beyond enjoying each other's company. After dinner, I showed Lily my newest painting, a watercolor of the cliffs of Moher that I'd painted from memory and photographs. Her eyes widened with genuine appreciation. You're such a good artist, Grandma Dorothy. When I grow up, I want to paint like you. Would you like me to teach you? I offered. We could set up a little easel here in the studio. Really? Could we paint the lake? We could paint anything you want, sweetheart. Amanda watched this exchange with something that looked like wonder. Later, as we sat on the couch with coffee while Lily worked on a puzzle, she spoke quietly. I'm still amazed sometimes, watching you with her. Watching how happy you both are together. What do you mean? Before, when I was treating you like free babysitting, Lily used to dread coming here. She could sense that you were stressed and that I was resentful. Now she talks about visiting you all week. It was true. Lily's visits now were relaxed and joyful. We painted together, read books, took walks along the lake, and simply enjoyed each other's company. There were no undercurrents of manipulation or resentment poisoning the relationship. Children sense authenticity, I said. When our relationship was based on obligation and exploitation, she felt that. Now that it's based on genuine love and respect, she feels that too. Amanda nodded thoughtfully. Dr. Williams says I'm learning to model healthy relationships for Lily. That maybe the best thing I can do for her is show her what it looks like when people treat each other with respect. As the evening wound down and they prepared to leave, Amanda pulled me aside. Mom, I have something to tell you. Derek and I have been talking about having another baby. My first instinct was a flash of panic. More babysitting requests, more demands on my time and energy. But then I caught myself and really looked at Amanda's face. She looked excited, but also nervous, like someone sharing good news with a person whose opinion mattered to her. How do you feel about that? I asked. Scared, but excited. We'd do things differently this time. We've already talked about hiring regular childcare so we don't repeat the patterns we fell into with Lily. That sounds like a wise plan. And we were hoping, if you wanted to, you could be the kind of grandmother you deserve to be this time. The kind who gets to spoil the baby and give them back instead of being the primary caregiver. I felt tears prick my eyes. This was what I'd always wanted. To be a grandmother who was cherished rather than used, who was included because she was loved rather than because she was convenient. I would love that, I said. After they left, I stood in my kitchen cleaning dishes and reflecting on how dramatically my life had changed. The woman who'd been abandoned at a bus stop without money or dignity had become someone who hosted birthday dinners in her own beautiful home, who traveled to foreign countries, who had art exhibitions and teaching commitments, and a calendar full of activities chosen for joy rather than obligation. But perhaps the most important change was internal. I'd learned to distinguish between being needed and being valued, between sacrifice and love, between enabling and helping. I'd discovered that saying no to the wrong people freed me to say yes to the right ones. I walked to my art studio and pulled out a fresh canvas. Tomorrow I would start a new painting, something bold and vibrant that captured the joy I felt in this new chapter of my life. Something that celebrated not just survival, but transformation. The phone rang, and I almost ignored it out of old habit. But when I saw Margaret's name on the caller ID, I answered with a smile. Dorothy, how was your birthday dinner? Perfect, I said, and meant it completely. I'm so glad. Listen, I wanted to remind you about the gallery opening on Friday. The artist is featuring paintings of strong women, and I immediately thought of you. I'd love to go. After we hung up, I sat in my studio surrounded by my paintings, my books, my comfortable furniture, and my carefully chosen life. The lottery money had given me financial security, but it was the courage to value myself that had given me everything else. I thought about all the women who might be sitting in cramped apartments tonight, feeling invisible and worthless, believing that being used was the same as being loved. Women who'd spent so many years making themselves small that they'd forgotten they deserved to take up space in the world. If I could tell them anything, it would be this. You are not responsible for managing other people's emotions or solving their problems at the expense of your own well-being. Love should never require you to diminish yourself, and it's never too late to start over, to set boundaries, to demand respect. The woman who'd collapsed at that bus stop had believed she was nothing without other people's approval. The woman sitting in this lakefront condo had learned that she was everything with her own. I opened my journal and wrote, "Year 2 of my new life begins tomorrow. I am no longer surviving. I am thriving. I am no longer someone's victim. I am my own hero. And I am no longer afraid of being alone, because I have learned the difference between loneliness and freedom." Outside my window, the lake stretched endlessly toward the horizon, dark and mysterious and full of possibilities. Just like the life I'd built from the ashes of the old one, I had never been happier to be exactly where I was, exactly who I had become. Have you ever felt like you were giving everything to people who saw you as nothing more than what you could provide for them? Have you ever found yourself in a relationship where love felt conditional on your usefulness? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. These stories need to be told, and they need to reach the people who need to hear them. Someone out there is sitting at their own bus stop right now, and they need to know that it's never too late to stand up and walk away. Your worth isn't determined by how much you can give to others. It's determined by how much you value yourself.